Hi, everybody, and welcome to interview number 2 here on the YouTube channel. It's called St. Thomas Aquinas for everyone because I'm a big fan of St. Thomas Aquinas, and that is what I have primarily studied, and I teach it to high school kids. I love St. Thomas a lot, but during these interviews, we're branching out, and we're talking about a lot of different philosophers and philosophy because it really does fascinate me. My first guest is the same as my second guest because I'm going to sit down again with Joe Provenzano and pick his brain about a really fascinating evolution of philosophy diagram that he created that is kind of like in the shape of a tree. You can kind of see it here. If you can look at that. You probably can't see it too closely. But this has different areas of philosophy and the philosophers who are associated with it. So I'm very excited. Welcome back, Joe, and thank you for. I must not have mistreated you too badly in the first one because you came back for a second.
This
so
is
good.
I hope it's helpful.
No, it certainly is. I appreciate you sitting down for these. So let's tell me just kind of with broad strokes. Let me ask you first why you created this kind of diagram, what the purpose of it is, and I know people can't see it so much, but it's got a lot of good 20 or 30 philosophers on this diagram. What exactly? How would you describe it?
I never started out intending to write a history of philosophy. I started out trying to get some answers, and I was digging through them like crazy, one after another, on my own after college graduation. And I was realizing that each of these philosophers, especially the great ones, had some kind of a fundamental insight. They assumed the universe was reasonable, or they assumed it wasn't reasonable, or whatever. And then I discovered Teilhard de Chardin, who saw the universe as one of increasing consciousness and complexity, where everything had to be tried until you get the right answer. For a short example, when we were trying to fly, someone tried the bat wings, somebody tried the umbrella going up and down, finally somebody discovered the wing and the Bernoulli principle and lift. That all the energy goes into that. So, but when you don't know, it's a probing attempt. Well, philosophy's never gotten there yet. Mm-hmm. So it's been probing in all directions. So I realized that it's probing in all directions, and those directions are different, really, activities of human beings that we do. We reason, so we looked. There was people focused on reason. We do science. We have free will. So I began to put the philosophers on those branches and see where each branch went to and what its logical conclusion. And could that branch really have the actual starting point, or is there another starting point?
Would it be accurate to say that obviously not many people would deny we have free will, we have reason, we have senses, there's we have passions, and some of these philosophers kind of latched on to one part of that or another, like Nietzsche, for example. We'll talk about him. He was big on free will. The empiricists were big on sensory experience, right? The rationalists about, I think therefore I am, like Descartes said.
That's right.
So maybe do you think that's a deficiency in their part, that maybe some of these guys went too far in one direction and leaving the rest of the human experience out?
I do. I think they found something that was very fundamental as a starting point, but not the most fundamental. That's the trick. It's like a artillery piece. If you get it a little bit off, it's going to, by the time it lands, it's way off. Yeah. So if even though they had something very fundamental, it wasn't the most fundamental. And that's how I developed the tree.
The main kind of, I guess, vertical, part of this tree is reason, and then everything else kind of goes off of that. Is that intentional?
Yes.
So there is a priority given to reason above other parts of philosophy? Is that right?
Well, historically, that's where it started.
Yeah.
And that trend continued for centuries. And when it got to where nobody quite got the philosophy that everybody else would buy, and so when that happened, somebody said, well, we got to go another direction. That's when these other directions started to pop out. Mm-hmm. So it's the core. And I still think that I consider myself on that branch. Mm-hmm. I just don't think reason itself is the most fundamental starting point. There's something else more fundamental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's. Last interview we talked about Thales and Thales. Okay, thank you. And how he was kind of like the first philosopher focused on water, and you said it was, and that wasn't complete philosophy by any means, but he got things going.
The
next person on the list is Socrates. My understanding of Socrates is he just liked to walk around and ask questions, and it always seemed to never quite. There's always another question that led to another question to another question. That was kind of his MO, right? It was
Well, that was his style, but he really deep down believed that that we should base our acts on reason, and we should go for moral improvement. The problem is he couldn't really connect. Okay, exactly how should I live to exactly what you're saying? He didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't quite. He didn't know about evolution or the direction of the universe is moving or anything like that. So, but yeah, he was more than just asking questions.
Yeah.
That's a very good. To me, that's a tremendous insight that we should base our acts on reason.
Yeah. I'll end up, I know, doing full interviews with you or somebody about Plato and Aristotle because they really deserve, more than a minute or two. But can you summarize their contributions, Plato and Aristotle?
Plato had the vision. His starting point is that truth is truth, and it can't be changing. So when you look around, you see everything's changing in this world around us. That can't be reality.
Yeah.
He envisioned a world of what he called it the world of ideas or something. There's a circle, the perfect circle, and that world of ideas transcends our natural experience, and we can't see it.
Yeah.
But that's what's really real, and the physical world is not really real.
Yeah. Kind of denigrating the physical world to some degree,
yes,
right?
Yes. And that's part of why he's not as popular, maybe. Because, Aristotle came along and said, I like your point, but this table's here, partner, you know? And now, so that's where Aristotle, he thought you could reason to truth and develop the way to act, pretty much like Plato, but your knowledge starts with your sense. See, with Plato, your knowledge starts by thinking.
Mm-hmm.
With Aristotle, you get sense experience, and then you think on it, and then you do philosophy.
Yeah, and Aristotle was Plato's student. They opened up different schools. Right. So they, and again,
they differed mainly on that where you get your first knowledge from.
Yeah, and then as we go up the reason line, you've got Aquinas on there. People on this side have heard a lot about Aquinas. Of course, I'm a big fan, but I won't talk too much about him. Descartes. I think, therefore I am. You talked a little bit about that in the last interview, but that was pretty revolutionary, wasn't it? People call him the father of modern
that's because
philosophy,
instead
right?
of just saying we start thinking about things, he started thinking about, he turned philosophy inward. Let's start with how our mind is working, or what we know inside on ourselves, rather than what we can think about reality. And like I say, I think his point was true. He does prove that he exists. I'll buy that argument. Yeah. And I think it's true for me. But he went on to conclude all kinds of other things, like, well, there must be a God exists, and he went on, and he just built too much on that one little insight. Yeah,
made him awful famous as a philosopher, though, didn't it?
It did. But you don't find anybody saying I'm a Descartian these days. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not too much. Let's a couple others along this reason line. I've always been very fascinated by Hegel. The dialectic, the influence that he had on Marx, right?
Absolutely.
So
let's do Spinoza real quick,
okay,
and then
Spinoza,
Hegel, because Hegel
yeah.
is a tweak on Spinoza.
Oh, okay, Spinoza.
Spinoza said the universe is kind of like our reason. It's very reasonable. It's very logical. There's a God. There's a reason for everything. God had to create a certain way. But ultimately, if you follow that line of thought, guess what? There's no free will.
Mm-hmm.
Even God had to do it a certain way. Everything is fixed, and there's no free will. So that's kind of a dead end.
Yeah.
Well, Hegel came back and said, it's not that simple. He was pretty good, but it's not that simple. Things change. Something will develop, and that is truth. It's not absolute, though. Pretty soon it'll spawn another thing, an opposition. And then the synthesis then a synthesis forms, and that's the new truth. And that's what's driving everything that's going. So it's like Spinoza, but it's dynamic. Then he call that a dialectic.
Yeah.
When the two meet.
And Hegel allowed for free will?
Well, no.
He didn't either. It was just a machine that was rolling along, and
ultimately you just are part of it, and you just gotta play along.
Thesis, antithesis, antithesis and then synthesis,
Yeah,
right?
and that's the dialectic process.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and then what he said was, you don't even want to have everybody acting freely, and you get nowhere. You need to obey what the state tells you.
Yeah.
So we some of us don't like that too much. But that's how you.
Yeah.
That's why I put Hegel at the end of the reason branch, because with Spinoza and Hegel, you end up saying if reason is the most fundamental thing in the universe, you're going to end up saying, see, Aquinas didn't say that. He was on that branch, but he didn't say that.
Yeah.
But if you say that, there is no free will. That's the end of the free will.
Yeah.
And then the existentialists rebelled against that.
Yeah.
We can talk about that.
Did Hegel believe that this process is heading somewhere? Does it ever say, okay, we've arrived, or was it just a nonstop process?
I think it's a nonstop.
It never ends.
He didn't envision any utopia, but you just got to listen to the state because it's always getting better.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't know if let's since we talked about Hegel, didn't Marx take that and then applied it to production, and that whole dialectic became kind of a practical application of it, right?
He did, but he said for as far as people are concerned, the most important thing is the methods of production in a society.
Yeah.
He made that the most fundamental starting point, which to me is a little odd because that kind of blows away the rest of the universe. It's a long time before people showed up on the scene.
Yeah.
So something was driving the evolutionary process. He ignores all that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a good philosophical start. But politically, it's a dynamite. And it is proven to be. He's the one that most people are following, whether they know it or not these days.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote the second edition, because I think we need to focus on that. But his concept, is that with the means of production being the most important, you end up having to listen to the state. Individuals have no rights, and what communism has done, and they've killed a lot of people.
And a lot of people, nowadays they may say they're a Marxist or a socialist, but they may not have an ounce of philosophical study. And I've always thought, even though I haven't done extensive philosophical studies, is that I talked to a priest today, and he said we need to start teaching philosophy to fourth graders. We need to start teaching people how to learn. We need to talk, tell them, at least have an understanding of who these people are, because it has real life implications. I mean, right?
I agree with him. The problem is, which philosopher you're going to teach. Aquinas is probably the best. But
right.
You
can teach them all.
He was one of my heroes. Is one of my heroes. Let me just give you a couple reasons why I think he's not as popular today as you would like him and I would like him to be. It's not because he did anything wrong. For one thing, he wasn't around for modern science. So people want to hear somebody that's telling us something that fits with what we know about the world today, and you can't blame him for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is the metaphysical method of reasoning down gave that whole reason branch a bad name, him included. But they ignored the beauty of his reasoning up, his insight, his metaphysical insight of being, that everything is contingent. It's like looking at a train car and it's moving, and you say, well, it's moving, but it doesn't have any motor. There must be an engine somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he looked at being like that. It's existing, but it doesn't need to exist. There must be something that has its essence is its existence. So I think that's good logic. But it's foreign words for today, and when it's used to go down and try to tell you how the planets move, that's what hurts him.
Yeah.
I think, I actually had toyed with the thought of putting together a book someday. Thomas and Teilhard, TNT, an explosive mixture. I think they could be put together, and no one has done that.
Yeah. So if you put that into a beaker, it's not going to explode.
I think it's going to explode in a good way.
Yeah.
I think it can be done, but I haven't.
Now Thomas would have said anything that has to do with reason or any discovery of a philosophical nature would have to conform to the teachings of the church, principally that all things end with God, right?
Absolutely.
But not all philosophers believe that. Of course, a lot of philosophers are atheists.
The other thing about Thomas was he thought all our knowledge begins with sense experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, science is nothing but, your binoculars you can see a little better.
Yeah.
And so it's an enriched sense experience. So he would be the first to buy evolution and everything else.
Yeah.
His followers tend to be don't do that though. That's been true for all the great thinkers. The followers won't allow any wiggle room from what the original person said. But I guarantee you, if Thomas Aquinas lived today, he would believe in evolution and he would tweak his philosophy just a little bit here and there, and it would be a dynamite.
If you lived today, I'd be booking him for this show. Right after you. I'd do you, and then I'd have Aquinas next.
I'd be watching.
That'd be great. I'd probably have to speak Italian or Latin, which would be problematic for him, for me, certainly. My understanding is the Descartes, I think therefore I am, the Spinoza, the rationalists kind of made way for the empiricists, right? And didn't they just kind of say, okay, rationalists, this is and we're going to flip it on its head? Would that be too simplistic, or is that what happened?
Well,
where they said, okay, forget reason, we're going to the sensory experience,
that and the
right?
fact that the reason branch wasn't getting anywhere, and they felt like, well, we got to go. We need to focus on what we know before we can, and so Locke and Berkeley and Hume, that whole branch, they started to focus on what we know, sense experience. And for some of them, sense experience was all there is.
Yeah.
The things don't even exist. It's just you dream. It's kind of hard to argue
Was
that.
that Hume? Was it? Because it kept getting a little.
Berkeley and Hume. Both.
Yeah. So how does that work? I mean, I know. So I'm a empiricist of the extreme. It's called skepticism, right?
It leads to full skepticism.
So I see this. But it's not real, or what does that mean?
Here's the thing.
Okay, I'm talking about a cup.
And you think you have this cup, but what if you were when you dream, you think you see a cup?
Yeah.
There's no cup there.
So I mean, there's no essence.
Well, there's no cup there. When you're dreaming,
not even there.
When you dream, you could be dreaming now. You can't prove to me that you exist philosophically, because I could be dreaming I'm having this interview.
Right. So that's what.
So if they just basically say they get so focused on the sense experience that they deny there's even something giving them the sense experience. And you end up with David Hume. There's no matter. There's no scientific method. There's no a priori truths. There's no human self. There's no soul. It's total skepticism.
Yeah.
And you just quit.
Were any of these guys Christians, or were they atheists, or
most of them were atheists.
Yeah, because they had to, and they would have.
They were atheists.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why I concluded sense experience is very important. It's the beginning of our knowledge, but it's not the most fundamental.
Yeah.
thing.
Now you put Immanuel Kant in his own little mini branch off of the empiricists who came off the reason line. Why? And Kant is a perplexing guy. But why did he get his own branch?
He's pretty cool. Okay, Kant. He's the only guy that I had more than one starting point for. Okay. Everybody else, I had one starting point. But for him, I gave reason, sense experience, and intuition, because he blended those three together. It's really, really interesting stuff. The reason branch had died. He figured the sense experience branch had died. But so he was going to try to save philosophy. So he wrote two books, The Critique of Pure Reason and The Critique of Practical Reason. Critique of Pure Reason is about that thick, and it's a pretty hard slog. But
have you read it cover to cover?
It's pretty hard. I have. That one I did. I haven't read them all, but that one I did. My 15-year-old one night didn't want to go to sleep, and I said, "Here, read this."
Asleep in about 20 seconds, huh?
But with
I'll have
Kant,
to use that on my kids.
Yeah. With Kant, he said it, we know by a combination. We have certain intuitions of space and time, the forms of sensibility, he called them, and the categories of understanding. And they come in your brain. They're given. Then you get sense experience, and they fit through those, and they come to you, and you use reason on that. That's the way we work. It sounds pretty good in a way.
Okay.
Well, he concluded from that you really can't answer the first big question. What's it all about? Because you got all this going on, see? So you can't answer the first big question, but he said, we have a moral obligation. We feel a strong urge to do the morally right, correct thing. So from that, he says we can recover everything that's been lost by the other philosophers and get back to there's a God, there's a moral code. It all comes from that. Well, it sounds good, but history has done two things. Number one, they bought him on the first one. You can't answer it. And they forgot him on the second.
Oh yeah, that's a categorical imperative, right? Is the application of the moral life and
but
duty, right?
He pushed it too far.
Yeah,
for
God,
most
pushed too
people.
far. Yeah.
He concluded from the fact that he felt the moral code that God must exist.
Yeah.
And that was a stretch too
Yeah.
far. So
now,
but what an effort.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
gotta
So
get him.
he's definitely one. I asked Dr. Pedro Kraft, right? You've heard of him. He's a very popular Catholic philosopher, convert to the Catholic faith, and I asked him one time who were the most problematic philosophers of all time in regard to the Catholic worldview, right? And he put Kant in that list. I'm trying to remember who the second one was. I don't think it was Nietzsche, but I know Kant was in there, and I don't remember the other one. But now I have heard Kant's first area that you're talking about called the Copernican Revolution in philosophy, compared to Copernicus saying the sun doesn't revolve around the earth revolves around the sun, right? What exactly does that mean? And
Well,
did
he
it
went from saying reason is the most fundamental or sense experience. He went to saying you got them both with intuition. So he just turned them both around.
Do we create our own reality?
No. We come with these. The mind has these. It takes sense experience and it organizes it spatially in different ways for us, and then we use reason. He had all three of those together. That's what he was so revolutionary about. He didn't have one starting point. He said it was all three, and he pushed them. He pushed it to the point that, well, you can't answer the first question because you're getting a kind of a distorted view.
Yeah.
But you got the moral imperative. So that's...
Yeah.
No one had ever done anything like that before. It was a revolution in philosophy.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. So that's Kant. And then we get into the free will philosophers. It ends with Sartre. How do you pronounce it? Sartre or Sartre or Jean-Paul Sartre?
Someone told me it had a syllable and a half. And I said, I'm from Texas. We take 3 syllables and make them 2.
Can we just call him Sartre? Is that okay?
I call him Sartre.
Sartre, okay, all right.
It may not be what other people
sometimes
call him.
I show my ignorance by not knowing how to pronounce these.
Yeah, well,
let me just pick a couple of them because you got 5 on this list. Soren Kierkegaard.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
They're
free
the two polar
will.
opposites.
Yeah, they Sartre and Kierkegaard are okay,
But
but
yet
on
they're
the same line.
They're on the same branch.
Okay.
That whole branch. Schopenhauer, who goes before that, was very pessimistic.
Yeah, atheist. Yeah.
But Kierkegaard, they were following. Notice they're just a little past Hegel.
Yeah.
Hegel said there's no free will. They blew up the other way, and said free will is the most fundamental driving force in the universe. But Kierkegaard believed there was a God, but it had to be an absurd. Your faith had to be absurd. You had to say, based on your faith, based on your knowledge, you couldn't know God, but you just do it. That's Kierkegaard.
Okay.
And Sartre said, well, you got it. Don't do that. You got free will, and you don't know anything about God. Then no God exists. There's just nothing.
Were they existentialists?
Existentialists.
Okay, so Kierkegaard was a Christian existentialist, and Sartre was an atheist existentialist.
That's right. That's right.
And they both disregarded essence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's no. It's
no
absurd.
No essence.
You create your own essence by your act. If you kill somebody every day, pretty soon you don't mind killing anybody.
Yeah.
You've created your essence. That's what they.
So some of this philosophy is dangerous, though, isn't it?
It's very dangerous.
Yeah.
The world is. It's a problem.
Yeah.
The funny thing about Sartre is that he saw consciousness and freedom. I mean, Teilhard and me and most people see those as above nature. I mean, it's an improvement, right? I'm over the rock. It just sits there. He saw it the other way around.
Yeah.
He saw the rock as solid. It's being for itself, being in itself. He saw consciousness as you're lacking something. You want something.
Oh, really?
So he thought it was a lower form. I don't like the guy.
Okay.
But he got very popular, but he didn't do it necessarily through his logic. His book, Being and Nothingness, is another crazy read. He's got all this logic about nothingness insinuating itself into the middle of being. and causing you to want something, and that's where consciousness comes. And it's pretty crazy stuff. But he got popular because he wrote plays and things, and people absorbed his philosophy without it going through their reason.
Right. And he died in like 1980, so he's relatively contemporary.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was what, 13 years old when he died. I mean, he's like he's a contemporary of you and I, isn't he?
He is. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but that branch,
so that's
ends up pointing down like the others.
Okay. Let's talk about the self-preservation line. There's some good ones in here. And again, we don't have time to talk about all of them. I think most people know about Darwin. He's quite famous. Marx, you have branching off from him. Nietzsche, Fredrich Nietzsche, atheist, will to power. What do we need to know about him?
Well, self-preservation. Okay, he saw self-preservation as the most fundamental aspect. And he agreed that not only self-preservation, but the drive for power.
Yeah.
You don't just want to survive. Once you're surviving, you want to tell each other what to do. So the drive to power becomes the most fundamental thing.
Yeah.
Well, the will to power uses reason as a tool. So reason is nothing but a tool to get. I use clever arguments so I can get in power.
Yeah, it's the power's the
thing.
That's the telos. It's kind of that's the purpose, right?
So anything you do, if it gives you more power, it's right.
Yeah, we certainly see that
makes right.
We see that played out in our world today, right? In politics,
too much so.
Yeah.
Of course, he says he's famous for saying we killed God. Well, what he meant by that was we killed the concept that there's a God who puts limits on us. There are no limits.
Yeah.
He wanted to develop the Superman.
Right.
And, we ended up, some people say he is not responsible for Hitler. Well,
maybe.
His thoughts, I think, whether he is responsible or not, I think his thoughts lead you there.
Did Hitler ever acknowledge reading Nietzsche? I mean, did he have it by his bedside?
I never really bothered to look. To me, it was logical that it would happen, and it did, and I quit right there.
Yeah.
I don't know the real.
All right. This is really fascinating. I appreciate so much. I hope everybody's enjoying this. The whole branch of philosophy having to do with language is something that I did totally. I don't know anything about this, but I know you want to talk about Bernard Russell. But let's start with is it Wittgenstein? Is it like a V sound? Wittgenstein?
He wrote Wittgenstein.
Okay.
Ludwig Wittgenstein. He wrote a couple of books and kind of changes. There's an analytical philosophy where you try to make perfect sentences, and there's ordinary language philosophy where you just try to improve language. But basically what they say was you can't do any philosophy. You can't reason about anything. All we can do is develop our language and try to quit. The word good means too many different things in too many different ways. You can't do philosophy like that. So you guys got to say what you mean by it. So it basically language isn't even up to asking the two big questions. You can't even ask the questions.
So he killed philosophy in a sense, didn't he?
For the 50th time. He wasn't the first to kill it.
One more nail in the coffin?
One more nail in the coffin. So that's what happened. Now, Russell was an interesting one, though, because he started out as a mathematician. He's on this branch because he was a linguistic philosopher. But he lived through World War I and World War II. He saw Hitler. He was a pacifist until Hitler showed up. And then he wasn't a pacifist.
Yeah, then he grabbed
his
gun.
And then Hitler was gone, and then he was again. So, I mean, that kind of bothers me, and something's wrong there. But the very interesting thing about him was you can't get an answer to the first question. You just can't.
What it's all about.
Right.
Yeah.
But you should live the good life. You should sacrifice for others. You should do all these wonderful things. The problem is it never caught on because why should I do that? If I can get it the other way and there's no objective right or wrong, he couldn't convince you that your own lasting happiness would be achieved that way. You just ought to do it because then you make everybody else happy. See, if you were arguing that there was something fundamental, even though you may not have any money, you would feel aligned with the universe. He didn't do that.
Yeah.
There was nothing fundamental.
Yeah.
So after him, I really concluded that you have to answer the first question before you can answer the second question.
Yeah.
And they're related.
Right. One leads naturally into the next.
And you can't
skip chapter 1 and start reading chapter 2,
he
right?
made a good effort as anyone could make to do that, but he didn't make it.
All right. The science line, Galileo, people, that's a household name. People know about him.
We can make this pretty quick.
Auguste Comte, positivism. We spoke briefly about him in the first interview.
Right.
My understanding with him is like if you can't prove it, test it, measure it, then throw it out.
Right.
There's no religion. There's no faith.
The interesting thing about that, see, they're doing away with all kind of metaphysics or God or anything, but they had the assumption, the early positivists, that you would study people just like you study, rocks and things and planets, motion and stuff. And science will figure out the perfect moral code.
Mm-hmm.
That was when positive first started, the classical positivism. But by the time you get to Alfred Ayer and you get to the more logical positivists, they don't even discuss morality. So science was optimistic is what I'm trying to tell you, early in the tree, that they could do the things, they could answer the second big question. By the time you get to Ayer and the others, if you can't verify it scientifically, it's nuts, no knowledge at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's no sense to even discuss morality. The funny thing is, Ayer said, free will is a muddled notion. It really doesn't exist. But it's kind of good to have a concept of free will in a way because it's salutary. I mean,
so he tried to play both ways?
He tried to play it both ways.
Yeah.
It made no sense, but without it, you can't put people in jail.
Yeah.
If they don't have free will, I mean, how can you put somebody in jail?
Yeah. Right. Because you're making a moral judgment about what they're doing, right?
No sense to discuss God or immortality.
That's why we don't put dogs in jail or grasshoppers, because we don't really acknowledge their free will. We might cage them up, I guess. Maybe that's the same thing. But we don't put them on trial and say you did a horrible thing. Yeah, right.
Right. We don't do that.
Yeah. Boy, we covered a lot of ground here. I really appreciate this very much. I think you would feel shortchanged if I didn't ask you to maybe comment on Chardin again, and you see him kind of as the apex.
The thing about if you view the universe as striving to increase consciousness and complexity, you can suddenly see how the rest of them fit in. Reason is a highest activity of a conscious creature. You didn't have reason at first. You had logical things happening. Free will, you would expect what I'm trying to say is all these branches show that if increasing consciousness absorbs all of them or covers all of them, and those are aspects of increasing consciousness, but each one itself is not the most fundamental. It's the increasing consciousness that's the most fundamental.
Mm-hmm. Consciousness being like knowledge of reality, or
human consciousness. First,
awareness, or
awareness, and then finally the complexity to reach the level of across the threshold. It goes from animal consciousness to self-consciousness.
Yeah.
Of course, we call that the soul, and so you can only view the history of philosophy that way, as all the others are aspects of consciousness, but don't pick one of them. You won't get it right.
But isn't that what Aristotle was getting at with the nutritive soul and the sensitive soul and the rational soul, and the souls are kind of
yes.
That's why I'm smarter than that plant, but smarter a little bit.
But it was static.
Yeah.
See, when it's moving, then you can get on the train.
Yeah.
So when you act in a way that, if I help somebody, humans have value all of a sudden because they're the ultimate consciousness created. So if I kill somebody, that's wrong because I'm going against nature, not just human stuff, but I'm going against the whole fundamental trend. That's the vector or the direction I saw in there that would allow you to develop a new philosophy and explain all the history.
Yeah,
that's what Teilhard allows.
All right. Well, I want you to write that book on Aquinas and Chardin and see how those two mix. You got Aquinas pretty low on this chart here,
that's only
but
because of time.
Yeah,
right.
It's
not because of right or wrong. It's because of time. That's where he came in the sequence of time.
Well, I read your book. I've read the first half. I haven't gotten yet to the conscious energy part, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. That's why when I thought about doing these interviews, you were the first guy that came to my mind. You were the first call I made because I think you summarized these philosophers so well and so concisely that I wanted to turn it into an interview, and that's exactly what we just did. So I appreciate you very much. doing that. The book is called Conscious Energy. We'll be talking to Joe Provenzano more, I hope. I hope he'll come back.
I would like to talk about the philosophy of conscious energy itself.
Yeah, the Fallen Angel Model is another. That's a small book, and that's a quick read. It even has pictures and diagrams in it, but that's another one we'll possibly be talking about as well. And so I do want to thank my wonderful daughter Maura for producing this and pushing all the buttons, and Joe's wife Linda is here as well. So thanks for her being our studio audience. The audience is just going wild here, isn't it? And thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy these. And if there's a particular area of philosophy that you would like a discussion on with Joe or somebody else, like I said, I think in my last interview, as I've reached out to philosophy departments at local universities like SMU and UD, there's a lot of interest, and we want to do a lot of these, and we want to pick really smart people's brains and kind of see what this is all about. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll have another one very soon on this channel. God bless you.